What's up, Takeaway Nation? I jumped on with Mark Wemken of the RotoBros Podcast to do a quick DFS Week 10 main slate breakdown. We're going to release it on the Fantasy Takeaway channel, so here it is. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast with Murphy Hamilton and Joe Pollock. Proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Subscribe, listen, take home the title.
It's a beautiful day for football. Welcome to the RotoBros DFS Fantasy Football Podcast. And man, this isn't just a RotoBros DFS podcast. This is a Fantasy Takeaway podcast as well. I'm joined by, you might know him as the Human Stat Sheet. I will always know him as the Producer Man. Joe Pollock, what's going on, buddy?
Chilling, man. It's good to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Hey, you know what? We had a lot of fun the last time we did this, so I figured, I don't know, I was just at work today and I'm thinking I need to do another show with Joe. Because I feel like you and we have fun. So
I think it turned out really good last time. I'm pretty excited to get into it this time.
Yeah, I thought we had a lot of fun. We're going to try something a little different. Instead of going game by game, I think it would be fun to go kind of position by position. First, I want to talk about this slate of games. We have a big slate. A little boring, though. We've only got 3 games with an implied total over 49.5. That's, of course, KC at Tennessee, 49.5 over under. We've also got Atlanta at New Orleans, 51 over under. And then, of course, Arizona at Tampa Bay, 52 over under. That is going to be a game. That game's going to be very popular. There's a lot of value in that game. So right off the bat, any of these games kind of jump out to you? They don't have to be the ones I listed, but like any game on this slate kind of jump out to you?
I actually really like that KC Tennessee game. It was one you listed, but it's fun on both sides because with Corey Davis out, we're looking at a lot of value at other positions in that game.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I actually have some nuggets we can talk about with A.J. Brown in that game. I think now that Corey Davis is out, he might be a little popular, especially in tournaments, but he is a guy that I'm already looking at. We'll get to wide receiver because we're going to start at quarterback first, but if you would have asked me the question I just asked you, I think I would have said the same thing. Patrick Mahomes is back. Kansas City has an implied team total of 27.5. Vegas would not let people bet on this game until we had a ruling on Patrick Mahomes. That's something I thought was interesting. That's just how much he would move the line. Of course, Kansas City has the 4th highest implied team total on the slate. Baltimore has the 5th at 27.5. KC 27.75. Tampa Bay is 3rd, 28.25. Indianapolis is 2nd, 28.25. And New Orleans has the highest implied team total on the slate at 32.5. Massive home favorite against Atlanta. I can tell you right now, and we're going to get to this, but this is exactly where I want Alvin Kamara. Let's start with quarterbacks first. Joe, we've got, as far as raw projections are concerned, you got to assume that Lamar Jackson is going to round out the top 5. Patrick Mahomes should be somewhere in there. Drew Brees. Of course, Aaron Rodgers after a dud, but he's been crushing as of late. So for this quarterback pool for the main slate, talk to me about this group, man.
I think that really this is a week where you want to pay up for quarterback because we have a ton of value at other positions. So I'm really interested in Lamar Jackson naked in that game. I would even consider a stack with Hollywood Brown, but I'm not super excited about that. Patrick Mahomes is always in play. It almost sucks that the news about him came out early in the week because I'm seeing his projected ownership jumping up into the double digits. And you know, it was exciting to see Patrick Mahomes maybe at a compressed ownership, and I don't think we're going to get that. Drew Brees with the highest total on the slate, you absolutely have to be looking at Drew Brees. And the one pay down option that I am interested in, we just talked about it, is Ryan Tannehill. I think that team's going to be playing from behind. They have a reasonable implied total. I think it's 21.75 right now. So they're looking to score basically 3 touchdowns based on Vegas implied total. I think that's a game you can stack with those players.
You know what I love about that game, too, is it's just so easy to stack when you get the value from Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown, especially over on FanDuel. A.J. Brown is only 5,500, but we will get to the wide receivers. Over on FanDuel, Ryan Tannehill, I believe, weighs in at 7,200. That's a value in my book. I would pay that all day. especially in cash games. I think Ryan Tannehill in this matchup in a pace-up spot is cash game viable. You mentioned Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is the most expensive quarterback on the slate. How many slates in a row was Patrick Mahomes the highest priced quarterback on the slate? Like, when was the last time we saw Patrick Mahomes as not the most expensive quarterback on the slate, I guess is what I'm asking.
In a game that he was expected to play, it's been a really long time. It's basically since the breakout.
I would guess like maybe week 3 or week 4 of last year. I remember week 2, after he threw 4 touchdowns in week 1 against the Chargers, he got the Steelers in week 2. And I was like, all right, Patrick Mahomes is only like $6K on DraftKings. I am playing him in cash everywhere. And then he comes out and throws 6 touchdowns. So when he is not the most expensive quarterback on the slate, Patrick Mahomes, I think, is going to be very popular. We have him projected for sub 10% ownership at TQE right now, but I think that is going to rise. I don't think that'll stick. What about Aaron Rodgers? We have him projected for pretty low ownership. We have him at a high TQE projection. So Aaron Rodgers is somebody I was interested in. Talk to me about Aaron Rodgers.
I like Aaron Rodgers all right. I think that it's a good tournament play because a lot of people are going to be on Lamar Jackson. They're going to be on Patrick Mahomes. I'm not thrilled about it in cash. That Carolina defense has been playing pretty well, and we've seen Aaron Rodgers, when there's a pass rush, kind of fall apart lately. I don't know what to think per se about Devontae Adams coming back. Like early in the season, the offense looked terrible with him. Now it looks terrible with him. I don't think that's going to continue, but I'm probably not putting my money in cash to find out this week.
I think Aaron Rodgers is a better leverage play over the field than anything else. I would not play him in cash either. Normally with quarterback at cash, in cash, I try to pay down as much as I can. That's why I'm interested in Ryan Tannehill. If I am paying up, I mean, you can pay 100 more and get Drew Brees. You can pay 300 more and get Patrick Mahomes, or you can pay 600 more and get Lamar Jackson. Like if he was in a spot where it's just like, okay, he's too cheap, yeah, play Aaron Rodgers. In this spot, I don't think I need him. In tournaments, just as like an ownership pivot, I definitely think he's in play. Another guy I like on this slate, but he's gaining some steam. He's projected to be pretty popular, is Kyler Murray. I think he's priced fairly at 6,500 on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, I believe he's 7,700. What do you think about Kyler Murray this week?
I'm not thrilled about Kyler Murray this week, and I'll tell you why. It's because he's going up against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is one of the most efficient run defenses out there, and Kyler Murray hasn't been asked to throw the ball downfield at all. Does that change this week? I'm not sure. In tournaments, I might throw a little bit of ownership at him just because he could start throwing the ball downfield, but essentially you want that rushing floor with him, and I'm not sure if it's going to be there this week.
I think I agree on the rushing floor to an extent, but this is probably the most notorious pass funnel defense in the NFL this year. With Kyler Murray, I'm a little interested because you look at his air yards per attempt. I mean, you're right. He hasn't really had to throw down the field a ton this year. He ranks outside the top 10 in air yards per attempt this year. So, but still, against a pass funnel defense, I do think this is a spot where Cliff Kingsbury can get a little creative. This is where I would like to see them get Andy Isabella on the field. Am I going to bet actual American currency on them doing that? No. This is like just a strictly football theory perspective. This is where I would look to get him on the field. But even after the spike play last week, I'm not looking to go that route. But I do think Kyler Murray is interesting in an insanely high total game. Right now, that total's got 52.5. Tampa Bay with a total of 28.25. So like that is going to be a shootout. That game should shoot out, but there are some leverage plays in that game as well, because we do have Kyler Murray projected to be a little bit popular. Matt Ryan is expected to play in the other extremely high total game this week in a dome against New Orleans. New Orleans is a pretty stingy defense, but Matt Ryan is way too cheap on DraftKings at 6,100. Are you on Matt Ryan at all?
Yes, absolutely. I don't think he'll be my cash quarterback just because we could see him re-aggravate that injury. And if he goes out there for 10 plays and hurts his ankle again, you're screwed. So I think I'd pivot somewhere else in cash. But in tournaments, I'm certainly interested. And there are some really interesting stacks in that game as well.
You know, that game is so fun to stack too, because there are ways to stack the highest total game on the slate or one of the highest total games on the slate and still be different. I like Calvin Ridley in that game, love Alvin Kamara in that game, but I like every single piece of that game. And we'll get to the running backs, we'll get to the wide receivers, because this is going to be a fun slate. I think there's a lot of value on this slate to kind of open things up to get Christian McCaffrey in your lineup. As far as quarterbacks are concerned, who are you most inclined to play in cash this week?
Currently, I have Patrick Mahomes in my cash lineup. It's hard to get him out. At $7K, like how often is he cheap as $7K or cheaper? Like it almost never happens. And we'll talk about it later, but there's some awesome stacks in this game too that have some pretty cheap players.
Yeah, I know. I want to talk about Sammy Watkins, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce in that game. I also want to talk about Damian Williams, but we're going to get to that. Early in the week in the Discord chat for the RotoBros, I was definitely preaching to play Patrick Mahomes as long as he's active, just because of the price point on DraftKings. I don't think I need to go that route on FanDuel where he's 8,400. He's a little easier to get to on DraftKings. My only problem with that is Christian McCaffrey just keeps crushing. He is the only player in fantasy football, maybe sans Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes, that has a 50 DraftKings point upside every time he steps on the field. So with him being priced at 10.5 on FanDuel, Patrick Mahomes is just hard to get to, because you want those bell cow running backs in your lineup, especially on FanDuel where you pretty much need to play 3 running backs in cash. I've been having a little bit of difficulty getting to Patrick Mahomes. Ryan Tannehill is probably my favorite quarterback play on the slate as of right now, just at 7,200 in a high pace game with a super high total. I would be shocked if he doesn't at least 3x his salary in that game. Let's move on to running backs. So for running backs over on FanDuel, let's sort this by the pricing. We've got Christian McCaffrey at 10.5. That's the highest priced player of the season so far. Saquon Barkley at 8.6. Alvin Kamara, 8.3. Mark Ingram at 8K even. Nick Chubb, 7.9. Aaron Jones, 7.6. And I guess we will stop there for FanDuel. Over on DraftKings, it's pretty much the same thing. Christian McCaffrey is 10.5 over there as well. Saquon Barkley, 8.8. Alvin Kamara, 8.2. Aaron Jones, 7.4. And Mark Ingram, 7.1. Nick Chubb, 7K even. Talk to me a little about this running back group.
Well, I'll start with the guys that I'm not playing. I really have no interest in Aaron Jones this week. With Devontae Adams and Jamal Williams on the field, his usage absolutely plummets, especially in the passing game. So especially when you're sitting at full point on DraftKings, I've got no interest in him in this game. I also am probably a little bit off on Mark Ingram. I don't think I'll get to 0% on him, but it's just when you look at games where they've been leading heavily, you would think a guy like Mark Ingram would be the nuts in games like that, but he's really not getting the kind of usage that you'd expect in those games. I will have 100% exposure again, as I did last week and the week before it, to Christian McCaffrey. It's just, you can't get away from it. Like, if you look at what he's done, he's been 3x, even if he was 10K every single week in all weeks, but the ones against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I don't see myself getting away from Christian McCaffrey. It's just, I don't want to be that donkey that faded Christian McCaffrey. I don't want to be that guy. You know, we see it on Twitter every week. Every time they bump up Christian McCaffrey's salary and people start talking, is it time to start fading Christian McCaffrey at the price? Like, I don't know if that price exists in daily fantasy. He needs to become literally unplayable from a salary perspective. I tweeted this out the other day, but I play NBA DFS as well. I'm having a lot of fun with NBA. I jammed 11.5 James Harden and 12K Giannis into the same lineup and cashed. Like, are you telling me I can jam those guys into a lineup, but I can't get a 10.5 Christian McCaffrey into my lineup and make it work? Like, get out of here, especially when I have a defense, when I can literally pay 3K for a defense to open up salary. Like, there's no good reason to fade Christian McCaffrey. You can't afford to do it. He could score. He is averaging what? 2.5 touchdowns a game. You can't do it. I agree with you on Aaron Jones. His target share drops from 18.5% down to 9% whenever Davante Adams is on the field this year. The offense gets progressively worse with Davante Adams on the field, which is mind-boggling to me. They're averaging 8.8 yards per attempt with Adams off the field and 6.8 with him on. Explosive pass rate drops by 8% with him on. Passing success rate drops by 5% with Davante Adams on the field. I don't understand it. I don't know what's going on with Green Bay. They can't seem to get things to work. It's like they can't make everybody happy. Because if Davante Adams is on the field, he's going to command usage. You know, if he's out there putting his body on the line, he wants to be getting targeted. You know, he doesn't want to just go out there as a decoy and watch Aaron Jones collect 20% of the targets. So, and I get that. I understand that. But it's just crazy to me that he, analytically speaking, is making that offense worse. So I don't think I have a ton of interest in Aaron Jones here, especially if he's going to come in high owned again, because we have him projected for over 10% ownership on both sites. So not really interested there. Saquon Barkley is 8.6 on FanDuel, 8.8 on DraftKings. He's a little easier to get to on FanDuel. Talk to me about Saquon Barkley.
I like Saquon Barkley, but I've noticed that when you go in and you look at what that team has done with and without Evan Ingram, you would expect a massive spike in target share for Saquon Barkley, and it really isn't there. So when I watch the film with that Giants team, my concern for Saquon Barkley and his ceiling is that Daniel Jones is refusing to check down. He is much more likely to throw the ball into double coverage downfield than to throw to Saquon Barkley in the flat. So I think that when you're looking at Saquon Barkley versus Alvin Kamara, and Alvin Kamara is $600 cheaper with the highest implied total on the slate, I'm going to be pretty underweight on Saquon Barkley at that point because I think Alvin Kamara is in a smash spot for cheaper.
I think Alvin Kamara is kind of the guy that's getting overlooked. You know, he's coming off an injury. People are going to see those injury designations. Oh, his knee is banged up, his ankle's banged up. But we found out on Thursday that he's expected to play. So, like, he was always going to play this week, and I'm assuming the limited practice sessions are just load management at that point. So I am with you on Alvin Kamara, especially if he comes in under-owned. As the highest priced wide receiver on the slate, I really think that Mike Thomas is going to come in as one of the highest owned players of the day. And if that's the case, that's going to pull some ownership off of Alvin Kamara. So I'm with you completely. I think this is a great spot for Alvin Kamara. He has crushed in high total games before. He's crushed, historically speaking, at the Superdome. So I'm excited to see it. Looking back, so James Conner is not expected to play. Trey Edmonds is banged up, might not play. Benny Snell, still banged up, not practicing, not expected to play. What do we do with Jalen Samuels at 6.2 on FanDuel?
I think on FanDuel, he's absolutely in play. On DraftKings, I'm looking at a lot of plays in a similar or cheaper price range, and I can fade Jalen Samuels. But when you look at the 19.5% target share with Connor off the field, you've got to be interested in that. Even if he just gets you 9 or 10 catches in a game for 25 yards, that's a safe floor for you. And that's really what he's been doing with James Conner out.
I was concerned about Jalen Samuels earlier in the week when I thought that like Benny Snell might be active or Trey Edmonds. But yeah, the thing about Jalen Samuels is he only played 63% of the snaps. He did not see that Christian McCaffrey-esque workload, or at least snap share that we all projected. And yeah, most of us in the industry were projecting 80 to 90% of the snaps. We did not expect Trey Edmonds to actually play football in this game. So he's going to be all they have left. And now he's a lot easier to get to on FanDuel, where he's 6,200. On DraftKings, they priced him all the way up to 63. He is still in play on DraftKings. Definitely still in play, especially with the PPR designation. But I agree with you. I think he's a better play on FanDuel. Nick Chubb, we have projected to be a little under-owned. He is $7K on DraftKings. I think that's a value. The only problem is Kareem Hunt is coming back this week. Any interest in Nick Chubb?
As far as cash goes, I'm fading both of those guys for sure, even though Kareem Hunt is like bare minimum priced at running back. But I think in a tournament, they're going to be under-owned. But, well, Kareem Hunt is probably going to be super owned. But Chubb is probably going to be under-owned this week, so I think he's a decent tournament pivot at his price point. I'm still a little bit worried. Like, we have no idea. So in cash, I'm definitely not going to pay the price for Nick Chubb, not knowing what the workload is going to be, what the split is going to be going forward. That could change next week, but this week I'm kind of out.
I think Nick Chubb really only needs about 60% of the snaps to absolutely crush. So and that's what I'm projecting for him. I'm projecting him to play about 60 to 70% of the snaps, with Kareem Hunt essentially neutralizing Dontrell Hilliard's role in the offense. I agree with you. I don't want to look Nick Chubb's way in cash. I think there are some better plays. I think I would rather save the $800 and go Jalen Samuels way at that point, just because we kind of know what we're going to get from Jalen Samuels. But with Nick Chubb, I do think he's an elite tournament play. I really, really like the idea of playing Nick Chubb in tournaments, especially with Kareem Hunt coming back. People are going to kind of just assume that this could be a 50-50 split. And the thing is, in half the games this year, Nick Chubb only played 60 to 70% of the snaps anyway. So if Kareem Hunt plays 40% of the snaps, that is still enough work for Nick Chubb to absolutely crush. It's not like the Browns have a bad implied team total either. Their total's up to 21.5. They're actually still favored over the Buffalo Bills, which kind of blows my mind. I don't think they're beating the Bills, but that's neither here nor there. I am definitely interested in some Nick Chubb for tournaments. As far as the running back pool is concerned, I'm not on Mark Ingram. I think Derrick Henry is in an interesting spot, but I went his way last week and it helped me. I don't think I'm looking for lightning to strike twice. There are there's a couple more plays in this game that I want to talk about, mainly because two of them are projecting to be substantial chalk, and they're relatively cheap on DraftKings. That's probably why their ownership is projected as high as it is. David Montgomery and Devin Singletary are both priced under 5,500. David Montgomery is 53 and Devin Singletary is 5K even. Are you interested in either of these guys this week?
I actually am interested in Devin Singletary. I don't know why, but I just can't get to David Montgomery for some reason. It's just kind of a gut thing. It's probably not good fantasy analysis, but I just can't get to him. But with Devin Singletary, people were talking last week, you don't play Devin Singletary. It was a game script situation. 66% of the snaps isn't happening again. And then you turn around and it's the exact opposite game script in week 9, 68% of the snaps. I think you're still a little bit capped on touchdown upside because Frank Gore is still getting that goal line work. But I like Singletary, especially in a PPR format, just because if you're on the field for almost 70% of the snaps, like he has been the last 2 weeks, there's huge upside for a player that's as explosive as he is.
I definitely think there is upside there for both of them. My only thing is if I'm paying down at running back, I think there is some substantial leverage off of both of those players. Because like I said, we've got those players projected to be fairly high owned here at TQE, but the guy that I'm looking at around the same price point that we have projected for super low ownership played 70% of the snaps last week in the third highest total game on the slate, gets his all-pro MVP quarterback back. Is it finally Damian Williams season? Is his time finally here after essentially ruining people's fantasy teams through the first 8 weeks?
I hope so, man. He's only played 60% of the snaps or better twice in 2019, but 18 plus points in each of those games. I'm excited for Damian Williams. I'm really hoping that this wasn't a 1 week doghouse for LaShawn McCoy, because when I go and I watch the film on Damian Williams, he's the more explosive player out of those two when he's healthy. You could tell he obviously wasn't healthy 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, but now he looks like he's back to 100%. At 40, he's 4,900 on DraftKings, right?
Yeah, he's 4,900, and that's why I think he's a great leverage play. Because he's super cheap, played 71.7% of the snaps last week against the Vikings, has pass catching prowess, runs a 4.440. Like, there is a reason we were all in love with this guy over the summer. And you know, people have already taken all of their Damian Williams victory laps that were off him. But the thing is, he is not just a guy in the sense that he has ability in this league. He has pass catching prowess, extremely fast, splash play equity, and he has been a fantastic goal line back for the Chiefs over the last year and a half or so. So at 4,900, if he's going to play 70% of the snaps again, I will play a lot of Damian Williams. I'm still apprehensive about the workload because we don't know if this snap share is going to be consistent. We would like to see it again in a second game, but I want to be ahead of the field on him, and I will be playing him in tournaments, especially on DK where he's only 4,900. FanDuel, he's 6K. He's a better play on DraftKings, but I definitely think he is still in play on FanDuel.
That's a really interesting price point on FanDuel because are you going Devin Singletary, David Montgomery, Ronald Jones, Jalen Samuels, Devonta Freeman, or Damian Williams? Like, you could probably play two of those guys. Which ones do you want?
No, I'm with you. I think I'm only playing one because I think in most of my lineups, especially in cash, I am locking in Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara. And then I'm going to pick one of those guys. I want to pick Damian Williams, I want to pick the lower owned of the guys. And at the same, I think he's got the highest ceiling, like by far. He's going to be the guy. If he plays 70% of the snaps again, target share equity, he's got the most touchdown equity by far, and he's got the most big play potential by far. Like, if he's going to play 70% of the snaps again, he's the best play in that price range, and it's not even close. One more guy.
Ronald Jones, is that where we're going?
If you want to go Ronald Jones, you'd be my guest. He doesn't command the target share that I look for.
I'm just looking at his price point on DK, and it's only 4,300. That gives you so much room at other positions. And if he gets 20 carries again, that target share might not matter.
No, you can't turn your nose up at 20 carries at 4,300. I just think his upside is a little bit capped. He's not a bad play. I definitely think he's a good play. It's just, I think given what Damian Williams is priced at, I would rather pay the 600 more and shoot for the moon with Damian Williams upside.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, but it really does. It allows you to pay up a little bit more at other positions, so I'm going to have some exposure to Ronald Jones on DraftKings.
I think he's in play. I think he's in
30
play.
implied team total, like, he has touchdown upside, certainly.
Yeah, especially if he's going to get 60% of the snaps. I know last week he set a season high, a career high, actually, in snap share. One more guy I want to talk about, Ido Smith. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. I believe it's Ido. He got ruled out. He's going to miss his third straight week of football. We had the bye week last week, so he's still not healthy. We have Devonta Freeman projected for fairly low ownership. He's 5,100. He played 80% of the snaps in week 8 with Ido Smith off the field. Any interest in Devonta Freeman at all?
Absolutely, because this game could turn into an absolute shootout. And without Ido Smith on the field, Devonta Freeman has 83% of the team's red zone carries. There is massive touchdown upside, and he's relatively cheap. I think that I'll have some exposure. It's not going to be near 100% by any means, but he's a guy that you can't look away from. He's got to be in at least a few of your lineups if you're playing multiple lineups.
If you're doing maximum entry, I think the two cheap running backs in good spots that I would prioritize are Devonta Freeman and Damian Williams, with a little bit of that David Montgomery, Devin Singletary chalk mixed in. But those guys are projected for much lower ownership, same price point. I think they are elite tournament pivots this week. Let's move on to wide receiver. So over on DraftKings, sorted by salary, we've got Michael Thomas at 8.3, Tyreek Hill 7.7, Mike Evans 7.6, Julio Jones 7.5, Chris Godwin 7.4, Cooper Kupp 7.3. High-end wide receivers, talk to me about this group.
In tournaments, I'm absolutely looking at Tyreek Hill because you have to stack that game. Like, why not stack that game with the price you could get out of Damian Williams? But I like Julio. I like Michael Thomas. That Mike Evans, Chris Godwin thing is just a conundrum that I'm not totally staying away from it, but it's so hard to like increase your exposure to your highest points with those guys just because which one is it? Like, it's basically correlated with pass rush so far this season, but are we going to see a pass rush out of Arizona in that game? They've kind of been hit or miss on that front.
You know, the worst thing about those two is you're never getting either of them at a discount from a price point, and you're never getting either of them at compressed ownership. The field is on those two every week. They're priced up every week. They're just so difficult. The worst part is how many wide receiver 1 weeks, and I mean overall wide receiver 1 weeks, have we seen out of those two combined? I believe they have 4. I'm almost positive Chris Godwin and Mike Evans each have 2 overall wide receiver 1 weeks. Was Mike Evans the 1 or the 2 last week? He was the 2 behind Tyler Lockett, right?
I
want to say he was the 2.
So.
Yeah. Okay. So that would mean they have 3 because I know Chris Godwin has 2, Mike Evans has 1, but Mike Evans absolutely crushed last week too against Seattle. I mean, if you stacked that game, it was the chalky thing to do, but it was the way to go in cash. We were preaching it in the Discord all week. A lot of the RotoBros subscribers went that direction in cash. They played Russell Wilson, stacked him with Tyler Lockett, ran him back with, I think we were on Godwin. So we got that one wrong.
I missed it with Godwin too.
Yep. We were on Godwin.
It sucks. I should, in retrospect, you should have played a lineup with each of them in a tournament. That's what you should have done.
Probably. But yeah, it's just tilting. It's so tilting because they're hard to get right. And Mike Evans is good. Fantasy Twitter gets on Mike Evans' ass because he doesn't rack up yardage after the catch, but he does everything else well. Like it's really hard for me to criticize Mike Evans as a football player because he can't accumulate yards after the catch after seeing some of the jump balls he can win, just some of the routes he can run, some of the plays Mike Evans is capable of making. It's really hard for me to criticize him as a football player. I take nothing away from Chris Godwin. I think he's fantastic too, but I do think there are some good ways to go in this game. I think if it were me, I think I would go back the way I went last week. I would play Chris Godwin again. I definitely think with Mike Evans drawing Patrick Peterson, I think this could be the spot for Godwin to shine. Arizona is giving up yardage over the middle at a astounding rate, and I just think this is the spot where we want Chris Godwin. Michael Thomas is projected to be the highest owned wide receiver on the slate by pretty much every ownership projection model in the industry. We've already talked about this. I would rather have Alvin Kamara. Are you interested in Mike Thomas at all?
I think if you have zero exposure, you're making a mistake if you're entering a ton of lineups, but he won't be in my cash lineup. I would prefer Alvin Kamara as well.
Yeah, and just at the price point, I think there are better plays. Like, he's just so expensive compared to everybody else. He's priced at 8.3. The wide receiver 2 is Reek, and he's 7.7. He's 600 cheaper with the same ceiling, lower ownership, just as high a total of a game. And like, Tyreek Hill is in a low-key smash spot. I believe Malcolm Butler was already ruled out.
Malcolm Butler was put on IR.
He's put on IR, so he's out. So that's one starter off the field. Adoree Jackson, I think, is expected to play in this game, but he's banged up as well. So this is a spot where I'm definitely interested in Tyreek Hill, especially if he comes in under-owned. Over on FanDuel, prices are a little bit different. Michael Thomas is 8.7, Mike Evans 8.6, Chris Godwin 8.2, Cooper Kupp 8.1, Reek is 8K even. He's projected for lower ownership on FanDuel, which is actually where I think I will get most of my exposure. Another play on this slate that I'm absolutely in love with is Julio Jones.
You gotta play Julio. Absolutely have to. He's in such a smash spot. Like, he's one of those receivers that will give you a 50-point week every now and then, and this very well could be that week.
I agree with you. Julio Jones can break any slate he feels like, and at 7.5 on DraftKings and then 7.9 on FanDuel, like, he's just that's too easy.
He's not even projected to be a top 10 player in terms of ownership either. I think it's a great spot to leverage him.
Yep, we have him projected for sub 10% ownership. I think he is, along with Alvin Kamara, like that's your pivot right there off the Mike Thomas chalk. Assuming he's the highest owned player on the slate, that's your pivot right there. You stack your lineup with Alvin Kamara and Julio Jones. You do like a mini stack. You don't even need to run it back with a quarterback. Just play Alvin Kamara and Julio Jones in the same lineup. You've got a little onslaught stack. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Just the concept of stacking multiple games with mini pieces, that's kind of taking over. That's winning tournaments at an astounding rate, kind of like how full-on game stacking did a year or two ago. But this onslaught stacking thing is a lot of fun. I've been trying it in NBA, and I've definitely deployed it in the NFL with some success. So, but yeah, I think that's the best way to leverage that Mike Thomas chalk, is to just play Julio Jones at a suppressed ownership, play Alvin Kamara at a slightly suppressed ownership, and you have 2 of the 3 highest ceilings in that game. And if Mike Thomas doesn't go off, Alvin Kamara will. Like, that's almost a guarantee at that point.
And you've leveraged the crap out of the field at that point.
Yep, it's great leverage. And I know it's pretty much the cool thing to do now to talk about how we should just be playing the best plays and say to hell with ownership at this point, the way the season has been going with all of the chalk just crushing every week. The industry is just getting sharper. And so it's really difficult to kind of try and outsmart an industry that is just constantly moving forward, constantly getting sharper. As far as this wide receiver pool is concerned, I still think there are some other really good plays. One I'm looking at right now is Devontae Parker. He is 5.8 on FanDuel. I think that's a value with Preston Williams being put on IR. With Preston Williams off the field this year, Devontae Parker's target share spikes from 15.5 all the way up to 26%. Any interest in Devontae Parker this week?
I feel like I'm having a bit of a Admiral Akbar moment here. Like every time that I go after Devontae Parker and he's supposed to be the wide receiver one on that team, it turns into a trap. So I guess he probably will be pretty lowly owned because of that. So I think he's a decent tournament play, but I'm not going to have all that much just because this offense has the potential to do nothing. They are bad at football almost across the board.
You know, it's really hard for me to justify rostering players on teams that are literally trying to lose and trying not to score points. He's in a good spot, though. He's going to see some volume. They should be chasing pretty much the whole game. But that kind of reminds me, we didn't talk about Marlon Mack at all. And I know many projection models across the industry have him projected to be one of the higher owned running backs on the slate. And he's in a great spot. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it makes complete sense. But if you're looking for a way to kind of leverage that Marlon Mack chalk, T.Y. Hilton is going to miss his second straight game, should miss the next 2 games after that. Paris Campbell is hurt. He's not going to play this week against the Dolphins. We have Zach Pascal projected for fairly low ownership at 6.4 on FanDuel. What I mean by that, he's 6,400. I don't mean he's projected for 6.4% ownership, but we have him projected for fairly low ownership. I think he's a fair price, and then we only have him at 5.3 on DraftKings. I think he could be a value. Are you on Pascal at all?
I'll be on Pascal a little bit. I think Chester Rogers is actually a guy that you can look at for about $1,000 cheaper on DraftKings too. Like his TD rate jumps to 16.7% with T.Y. Hilton off the field. The problem here is that when you go back and you watch the film of Indianapolis from last week, you can tell by the way the quarterback looks down the field who is the first read in the play design. And it's the tight end just as often or more often than it's either of these wide receivers. So I think it's a little bit scary. It's probably better tournament play than cash play, but I will have exposure to both Zach Pascal and Chester Rogers.
Yeah, we were on Jack Doyle in the Discord chat last week. It was a tight end punt. We got lucky with a touchdown. I don't think it was like an elite play by any means, and I'll be the first to admit, I think we lucked out by getting that touchdown. But I do think Jack Doyle could be in play again. He's a little scary for me, and I think there's a couple of really good tight end plays on this slate, so I don't think I will go that direction. Something a lot of people have been asking me in the Discord is OBJ is 6.1 on DraftKings, projected for almost no ownership. He's cheap on FanDuel as well. Let me grab his price on FanDuel. He is 6.9 on FanDuel, so he's a little easier to get to on DraftKings, but still low ownership across the board. I haven't seen OBJ this cheap since his rookie year. Any interest in Odell Beckham Jr.?
It's hard to invest too much in that offense, but Odell Beckham is still an elite player. When you watch him on film, he still runs some of the crispest routes in football. He still has amazing hands. I can't get too much exposure to him just with the way that Baker Mayfield has been playing, with how much pressure that offensive line is giving up. But I think he's in an okay spot. Like, Buffalo's pretty good. I'm probably not playing him much, but I think as a tournament pivot, you could do worse at that price point.
He's just so cheap that, like, I feel like if you don't play him at 6.1, you're an idiot. And then after you play him at 6.1 and he does nothing because he played against Tre'Davious White, you're an idiot. Like, this is either way, you're stupid with Odell Beckham Jr. I don't see myself on Sunday morning looking at his price point and going, nah, brah, this ain't it. Can't play OBJ at 6.1. Like, I'm going to end up playing him in some spots. But as far as value wide receivers go, I'm going to talk about one that I really like. I would like to hear one or two of yours as well. But my favorite value on the slate as far as FanDuel is concerned has to be Calvin Ridley at 5.3. Again, one of the highest total games on the slate. He's getting his quarterback back in Matt Ryan. Julio Jones is going to be tangled with Marshawn Lattimore. I just think all around, this is a fantastic spot for Calvin Ridley. What do you think?
I like Calvin Ridley. I'm also interested in Russell Gage in that game. His target share after Mohamed Sanu left to New England has been really nice. I don't think that there's a ton of touchdown upside there, but he is absolutely cheap. 3,400 on DraftKings. I don't have the number in front of me on FanDuel, but I like Calvin Ridley. I think he's a really solid play, but I think you can play any of these wide receivers for this Atlanta Falcons football team this week.
I think you can play anybody in that game. Everybody in that game is in play. One more guy I like, we talked about him a little earlier, and that's A.J. Brown. He sees a nice 5% increase in target share with Corey Davis off the field this year. He's 5.5 on FanDuel, so he is a big time value over on FanDuel. On DraftKings, little bit different. I don't have his price in front of me. Let me go and check it.
4,300. He's a fantastic value there too.
Oh, 4,300. He's good on both sites. He is in play on both sites, guys. That is definitely a spot I am interested in. AJ Brown, and like we were talking about, that game is just so easy to stack. You can get your quarterback, one of your receivers, you can get Ryan Tannehill and AJ Brown for a bargain, and then you can literally run it back with like Damian Williams, Tyreek Hill, and get an expensive piece and 3 bargain pieces from that game. Sammy Watkins has seen some nice value getting his quarterback back, has Tyreek Hill back to kind of take the top off of defenses, so he's available underneath. I think Sammy Watkins is definitely in play as well. And you're getting the price discount. He is priced where he should be. So those are my favorite value wide receivers on the slate. Any more wide receiver interest from you?
I'm definitely interested in Darius Slayton. He sees an 18.9% target share without Evan Ingram. Obviously, this is a little bit more of a tournament play than a cash play, but he is very cheap. 4,200 on DraftKings. He's a super value. The Jets are really bad in the secondary, too. I think he's a fantastic
so bad.
play. And they might be worse. I can't remember his name. It's off the top of my head, but they're maybe going to be without one of their top 2 corners this week again. So
let's see. Their top 2 corners were Tremaine Johnson, Brian Poole, I think. Does he guard the slot? I don't remember off the top of my head. Brian Poole, I know, has been playing decent, but I believe he guards the slot because they've just been getting cooked on the perimeter.
Yep.
I've been playing perimeter receivers against them all year long. Let's move on to tight end, and we'll get to defense, and we will end this show shortly. So with Travis Kelce, he is 6.4 on DraftKings, most expensive tight end on the slate, but I still think he's a good play. Evan Ingram is 5.7, but he is not expected to play. Austin Hooper, 5.5. Mark Andrews, 5.2. My personal favorite tight end play on the slate, Gerald Everett at 4.5. Jared Cook, 4.1. Jimmy Graham, 4K even. Eric Ebron, 3.9. And we will, Chris Herndon, 3.8. I think that would have been an interesting one to include. Talk to me about the tight end group.
I like Travis Kelce at 6,400. That's not elite tight end pricing, and he's got his elite quarterback back. So he's a player that I'm definitely interested in this week. Hooper with his 18% target share is a guy that you really can't get away from. I think that I'm going to be paying down for the most part at tight end because there are some really interesting pay down plays this week. But I agree with you. I think Gerald Everett at 4,500 without Brandon Cooks is probably one of the best plays on the slate.
Yeah, he sees a nice little 2% boost in target share. It's not significant. What I think is significant is he kind of becomes the downfield threat. He sees more air yards usage with Brandon Cooks off the field. So I definitely think Gerald Everett is a value this week at 4.5. He is 5.7 on FanDuel. I think he's in play on both sites, but definitely easier to get to on DraftKings. I am with you on Travis Kelce. He is projected to be the highest owned tight end on the slate, and I just don't care. Travis Kelce, he is cheaper on FanDuel than Mark Andrews this week. Mark Andrews is more expensive than Travis Kelce. Austin Hooper is only 100 cheaper. I think on FanDuel, Travis Kelce's the best play. He is one of the best plays on the entire slate on both sites, but I think on FanDuel, I will play him as often as I can get him. His price is kind of difficult to get to, but we've got that value at running back now where we can make it work. So I am definitely on Travis Kelce. If you're looking to punt tight end, who are you looking at?
Rhett Ellison, 100%. He's minimum priced. He gets a 21.6% target share with Evan Ingram out, and he has 25% of the red zone target share on those snaps. I don't think he's a fantastic play. He's definitely still a dart throw, and that's why he's priced as low as he is. But at 2,500, he leaves you so much room at other positions.
I think it's one of those plays that we're going to look at going into the slate and being you're not seriously going to play Rhett Ellison, are you? And then at the end of the slate, it's like going to be like, yeah, we should have played Rhett Ellison.
That's where I'm at, man.
It's a galaxy brain play on the surface, but honestly, it makes sense. And I feel like it's fair. It's fair. A year ago, I'd have said you're stupid. But now, seeing how well punting tight end has worked when the guys have been in good spots, like Jacob Hollister was in a good spot last week, but I was just like, it's Jacob Hollister. I'm not playing Jacob freaking Hollister. And he scored 2 touchdowns in a high total game. Those high total games tend to favor tight ends. So that's one of the big reasons why I think Travis Kelce is in a smash. I think tight end is pretty simple. If you're not playing like Travis Kelce, if you're not playing Kelce, then you've got Gerald Everett, Rhett Ellison, and Austin Hooper. Those are, I think, probably the best tight end plays on the slate. Those are the directions I'm going to go. Anything else at tight end?
If you're looking at what Kansas City has given up to the tight end, you can get some value with Jonnu Smith at 3,500. I'm not thrilled about the play, but it does have a ton of upside. With Delaney Walker out, Jonnu Smith's target share jumps by 10% and at 20% in the red zone. So there's certainly some upside there.
Yeah, there's some upside there. I played him 2 weeks ago in cash. I was just like, okay, he's actually inheriting a role.
He was like 2,700 that week, though, so it was a way better play then.
It was like he needs to catch 2 passes for 20 yards for me to not completely tilt rostering him. And he scored a touchdown in the first quarter. So I was just like, all right, cool. I'm smart and everyone else is stupid.
Yep. Yeah, I was on him I was on him that week too.
Yeah, it just made sense to me. It was just like Rhett Ellison. It just seemed like, this is stupid. Why am I doing this? Then he catches the touchdown and it's like, oh, okay. He ran 17 routes in that game. That should have blown up in our faces and it didn't. Yeah. And the following week, I was just like, I had 0%. I had no exposure. I was like, I'm not doing this twice in a row.
Total tournament pivot here. I've got Mike Gesicki's ADOT goes up by 4 yards with Preston Williams out. So like, he's not a good play, but he's one of those ones that you could throw in because he's going to save you a ton of cash. And he could be a really nice pivot on the field.
Are you sure about that? I have him projected to be one of the higher owned tight end. We have him projected to be the highest owned tight end on the slate for both sites.
I'm looking at Line Star and he's not even on the list.
He's just so cheap. He's 3.1 on DraftKings, FanDuel 5.3. I think he's unplayable on FanDuel.
Oh yeah, you can't play him at that price. There's way better plays at that price point.
Pay 400 more and you get Gerald Everett's upside. He is unplayable on FanDuel. DraftKings, I still don't quite see the upside. I don't think I'm going that direction, but if you did, you paid 3,100 for a starting tight end who is going to see an uptick in usage, I could get behind it. That's probably not the direction I'm going to go. Anything else at tight end?
Nope.
So for defenses, typically the first thing I do is I see who the cheapest defense on the slate is, and I just go and play them pretty much over the llast couple of weeks because we're getting defenses that are like historically cheap. They are pricing down defenses more than they ever have. Right now, for price point reasons, we've got the Ravens at 4K on DraftKings. We've got the Saints at 3.7, Colts at 3.5, Packers 3.2, Bears 3.1, Rams at 3K, Bills at 2.9, and Giants at 2.8 to kind of round out that top group. Where are you looking for defense?
Not at the top, that's for sure.
I never look at the top.
I mean, I do on occasion. The Patriots were great almost every week for the first 7 weeks of the season, but I don't see a play like that on this slate, and I do see some nice value plays. I think out of those ones you just mentioned, the Bills are probably the most interesting to me because Cleveland has been turning the ball over at an astonishing clip.
Yeah, I definitely think they're in play. I can't believe I have to resort to playing defenses against Baker Mayfield, one of my favorite quarterbacks going into the season, but that's just the way we got to roll. Defense is pretty tough. It's really hard to get away from cheap, chalky defenses. It's easy to get away from expensive, chalky defenses. I won't play the Ravens anywhere. I don't think I'll play the Colts anywhere. I think the Steelers at their price point are very interesting. They are projected to be one of the highest owned defenses on the slate, but that's chalk that I can eat. I am fine eating that chalk. At 4.1 on FanDuel, I think they have a ton of upside in their matchup. I'm interested over on FanDuel. I'm also interested in the Bengals. They're 3K. They are 3K. They are stone cold minimum. Panthers are only 3.3. I get they're playing the Packers on the road, but like, you know, we can hypothesize that maybe this offense doesn't fire on all cylinders when they have a target hawk on the field. Maybe this is one of those offenses that functions better when they can spread the ball around a little more evenly and they don't have to try and funnel usage to their highest paid, usually best performing player in Devontae Adams. I don't think anyone's going to play the Panthers, and at 3.3, they're 300 away from stone cold minimum, and they're just a better, like, you look at the Falcons, you look at the Bengals, who are 300 cheaper. Like, there is genuine upside with the Panthers to generate sacks, generate turnovers, and score a defensive touchdown. Like, they have actual upside, whereas with the Bengals or the Falcons, you're pretty much just hoping they don't give up 45 points.
If I'm looking for cheap upside, though, I'm going $200 more than that and paying up for the Arizona Cardinals at a bare minimum $3,500.
Love that play.
Jameis Winston turns the ball over so much. Like, there was a game earlier this year where Tampa Bay put up like 50 plus points against the Rams, and there was still 10 points available for the Rams DST. So,
yeah, that's the best thing too, is like they're projected to be fairly low owned. It's the same spot San Francisco San Francisco was in week 1. Now, we learned going forward that San Francisco was an elite defense, but still nobody played them against the Bucs, and that game was projected to be super chalky with all of the weapons in it. I just rostered the San Francisco defense as a leverage play, and they scored 2 defensive touchdowns. They absolutely crushed. So I definitely like the upside there. And in a high total game, high pace game, there's going to be a lot of room for Jameis Winston error. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for the Cardinals defense to generate touchdowns. And I think that's something a lot of people forget when they're rostering defenses and in not just like daily fantasy football, but regular fantasy football as well. Fast paced, high tempo games where there's a lot of plays run. Think about it like targets and carries. Pass attempts and rushing attempts are just, for a defense, are more opportunities to generate sacks, turnovers, defensive touchdowns. So in a fast-paced game, I definitely think there is upside for a defensive touchdown here. I like the Cardinals play a lot. Outside of that, that's probably the direction I'm going. I think I'm paying down. I'll play the Cardinals. I'll play the Panthers. Maybe I will get to the Bills. Anything else at defense?
And defense is kind of tough this week. I have a lot of exposure to the Cardinals. I don't have much else.
No, I think the Cardinals are like a top 3 defense play on the slate, and which is just weird to say because that game could easily explode and they could have -3 FanDuel points. But all right, I mean, that's everything. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and DST. The last thing I want to do with you, Joe, is talk about some of our favorite games to stack. And I would like to get a little contrarian here. I think the most stacked game on the slate is going to be Tampa Bay versus Arizona. So outside of that, what games are you looking to stack?
Well, we've kind of beaten it to death, but I love the Tannehill AJ Brown stack. Like, I don't want to put 3 players in that, but I'll certainly go and play it back the other way just in case the game is a total shootout and play a few Chiefs too. And at their price points, you can fit in a Travis Kelce in that situation too. So that's a game that I'm certainly considering having lineups with 4, 5, even 6 players in, especially with the price on Damian Williams. Obviously, you like the Falcons. Obviously, you like the Chiefs. I'm not really looking to stack too many other games because one of my favorite plays, even though it's going to be pretty chalky, is Lamar Jackson. And I don't want to stack that game with Lamar Jackson with anybody but maybe Hollywood Brown or Mark Andrews. I'm not doing both.
Yeah, I think I want Lamar Jackson in that game, and that's about it. We didn't even talk about Tyler Boyd. I'm going to be honest. When I thought AJ Green was coming back, I was all over Tyler Boyd at his price point. But now that I know he won't be back, he's going to get Marlon Humphrey again. I watched the film on Tyler Boyd versus Marlon Humphrey part 1. I want nothing to do with it. I'm not doing it again.
Nope.
If he explodes and I'm off him, I lost out. I'm not doing it again. I don't want to light my money on fire like I did a few weeks ago. I think Christian McCaffrey and Carolina defense is very much in play. We're playing Christian McCaffrey everywhere, but we already talked about the defense. I think that's a pretty interesting stack. What we didn't really talk, we definitely talked about Rhett Ellison. We talked about Darius Slayton. So if you're on both of those guys, does that mean you could just roll out a full Giant stack and maybe run Danny Dimes, Darius Slayton, run it back with like Robbie Anderson?
That's a really interesting game to stack because nobody in the field is really going to be on that. there's a chance that maybe the Saquon Barkley Giants DST stack is a good thing with how many times the Jets have turned the ball over recently. I'm not going to have a ton of exposure to stacking that game in either direction, but I think that it could be a good leverage play on the field.
I think it's a fun game to stack. I think there's a lot of ways to get creative with it. It doesn't have a horrible total either. Who's favored in that game? I think the Giants are.
Yeah.
The Jets have just looked so bad. My only problem is I think if I were to play a defense in that game, I would rather play the Jets defense against Danny Dimes. Danny Dimes is leading the NFL in turnovers since he was given the keys to the offense. But it's an easy game to stack. It's got a decent total at 44.5. Like, it's not high, but it's decent. It's high enough to the point where you can look at it and be like, you know what, that game could shoot out a little bit.
Part of the problem there, though, is that the Jets are only running 56.12 offensive plays per game. So you're really kind of capping your upside either way at that point. It's a fun stack to try as like a tournament pivot, but I don't think it's really a good stack per se.
I think the only Jets player I'd want to throw into my stack is Robbie Anderson. Like, if I was going to stack that game, it would be on the Giants end where I'd have the heavier part. Like, it would be Dimes, Slayton, Red Ellison, Saquon Barkley, whatever. And then it would be whatever that stack was, it would be ran back with Robbie Anderson. A guy we didn't talk about is Christian Kirk. Not projected to be super high owned on the slate. I think he is way too cheap on FanDuel. So if you're looking to stack that game, there is a way to be contrarian. There is definitely a way to be contrarian. You can play like Jameis Winston, Chris Godwin, run your stack back with Christian Kirk. Like, that's what I would be doing if I'm trying to be different in that game. And like, that's pretty much what I'm always trying to do.
He's pretty cheap on DraftKings too. He's only 5,200.
Yeah, he is definitely a value this week. That's pretty much all I got for stacks. Any final thoughts?
That's about it, man. It's a fun slate. I like the slate this week. I think there's a ton of interesting plays.
I agree with you completely. I think it's going to be a fun Sunday. Well, that's all we got for you tonight, guys. Again, you're going to find me on Twitter at Mark Wemken. That's MarkWemken. You're also going to find me on thequantedge.com every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Tuesday, snaps and targets report. Thursday, injury impact report. And on Saturdays, I will be breaking down the 4 p.m. slate as well as the Sunday night showdown slate. Joe, where are we going to find you, buddy?
You can find me at Human Stat Sheet on Twitter. You can find our podcast, The Fantasy Takeaway, on any podcast platform. Just search for it. It'll pop right up. And you can follow the show on Twitter at FF Takeaway. Thanks for having me on, man. This is always a lot of fun.
I think we need to do this at least one or two more times before the end of the season. If we did this weekly, I wouldn't even be mad. I could literally do this weekly if we ever found the time. But that's all we got for you tonight, guys. And hey, as always, keep balling, baby.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And follow the show on Twitter at FF Takeaway.